He just said no. And it's
Then I had to go
delivered,
help
and
a
that
friend
was
get his Harley
2 nights
Davidson
ago, and
started.
today
I
he's
keep
still
telling him,
very
buy a Honda,
crazy.
then one of
Oh, is
those.
that what you got?
Both of mine are, both of mine are Harley.
Anyways,
He,
I'm
like you say,
hoping
pre-recorded.
the-
I like the fact that I don't need to scare everybody on it.
No, it's too early to decide it did work.
Are we good?
I think you're good.
I think it's 6 to 8 weeks.
Are we good back there?
But I thought-
Okay, good evening. It's Monday, April the 10th. This is the regular meeting of the Waunakee Board of Education. Earlier in the evening, as provided by state statute, we did meet into closed session and took care of items appropriate for that in closed session, and we are now ready to reconvene in open session. My name's Julie Wayner. Our board president, Peggy Kolbreinik, unfortunately was feeling a little ill and off the weather with all this going around here lately, so I'll be helping to move things along this evening. So our first item of business for this evening is approval of the minutes from the previous meetings on March 16th and the special board meeting on March 27th.
Move approval of the board meeting, of the minutes of the meetings as posted.
Second.
All right, it's been moved in second to approve those minutes. Is there any discussion or comments? If not, those in favor?
Aye.
All right. And approval of agenda for this evening. There were some updates to the staff hirings, which we went over in closed session that are by everybody's table this evening. Short of that, we were expecting County Executive Joe Parisi to speak with us this evening on the Building Bridges program that Waunakee schools have been invited to partner with and work with Dane County on this. I don't see him here right now, so I guess I'll just ask for some flexibility that when County Executive Parisi shows up, we will move him in at that point. And other than that, I think we're good.
Yes.
Correct,
As
Brandy?
presented.
All right, so I need move approval of the agenda, please.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. So, leaving that public discussion for Executive Parisi when he gets here, we're now ready to start with the administrative reports, beginning with the student report. And I see our two lovely student representatives here this evening again, Amanda Koenig and Michaela Ripp.
Okay, so just some things coming up. Tomorrow and Wednesday we'll be having a blood drive, and that will be like over by the field house. So we're hoping to get a lot of people to come to that and get a lot of people to donate for that to match what we had in the, was it January the last one?
Yep.
Yeah, so we want to get more people than we had in January.
And then we're also going to be attending the state conference, April 23rd and 24th. So that's really fun for us to go and check out what the other councils are doing. And they always have like a hypnotist that comes and like a little dance. That's always something we look forward to.
And then we also have an open mic night coming up, and that will be a Tuesday. I'm not sure which
I
day.
think it's the 25th.
The 25th. So yeah, we're gonna try to get people to come out and show their talents on that Tuesday.
And then we're also have our office and custodial appreciation week coming up. And that's when we just get like, I think we make breakfast for them. So.
And then just a final thing that we're doing is on Wednesday we're gonna have a meeting and we're gonna elect the new officers for next year, and we're just gonna do them all. So then, and then we're also gonna talk to the middle schoolers on Thursday about being representatives. So we'll go over there and talk to them and tell them about what we do on student council. And then on May 4th we'll go to Devil's Lake and have the new officers that we picked and the new representatives from that will be freshmen, and we can introduce them to the council. Thank you.
So on that blood drive, are walk-ins welcome?
Yep.
All right,
Yeah.
so,
So
Or you can sign up online. too.
Yeah, can we make
Yeah.
appointments online?
Yep.
perfect, good to know. Well, thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
that
Thank you,
update.
ladies.
Next item on the agenda is board reports. This is where we have a chance to share with the other board members and the public different events or things we've taken in at the schools since the last meeting. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share?
I'd like to say that I went to the forensics team and got to judge one tournament, and then, what was it, last weekend or the weekend before, they took first place at state for the first time in Waunakee's history.
Awesome.
So it's kind of cool that a team that used to only have 15 students on it about 3 years ago now has over 45 and is able to take first place
Great.
at the state competition.
Cool.
Thanks for that, Dave.
Yeah, I think Walter Stenz is the coach, I
Yeah.
believe, and I know I was talking to Mr. Braun, he said he was explaining how large of an accomplishment that is. I think prior to this, the closest they got was second. It's great,
With over 70 schools there, that was pretty good.
it's huge.
Anyone else? Okay. Spring election update. I get to congratulate my fellow board member Joan Ensign and myself, I guess, too. We were reelected, and I guess I just would like to say I am grateful for this opportunity to serve the public and look forward to taking the oath along with Joan. And we will make sure we do that as stated according to law by April 24th.
So I think when Rebecca and I were talking, we do the canvassing tomorrow, so once we get beyond that, I think what we'll do is we'll just contact both of you and we can maybe stop in and one of the options we have is swearing in with the notary, and we can do that right in the office.
Yeah, right, great, looking forward to that. Right, next item on the agenda is our administrative reports and action items, beginning with an update of our strategic planning process.
All right, so tonight what we are going to be updating the board on is Herb Haubrick is here to talk about the technology budget projections and planning. We've had a number of discussions here over the last few months. I'm really trying to pull some of these pieces together to really give you a snapshot of, in a relatively succinct period of time, a lot of things that are happening in Herb's world. So tonight is going to be really that overview, and I'll turn it over to you, Herb, to really walk us through this part of the evening.
2 years ago, if you remember, I gave you a 5-year strategic plan, kind of a sustainability of my budget. We're 2 years into that now, and as everything technology, things change much quicker than we expect. So that 5-year plan is still good, but I think we have to update it somewhat continuously. So a 2-year span is probably a good year to a span to do that. So basically that's what I just said, update the 5-year purchase plan. Also look at some scheduling of some other projects that we'd like to do. VoIP, door access, clocks PA. Move into a 5-year plan forward then, so knock off the last 2 years and then add 2 more years onto this plan. So we'll stay with a 5-year plan, but we'll kind of jump 2-year increments when we go to this, and then look at some goals for the next 2 years that we want to do. So there's the strategic plan. So anyway, here's my arrows. Everyone has arrows. You'll notice that these represent technology, and it's coming up from the bottom because technology doesn't really have a square in the strategic plan, but it supports all of it. So it's supporting it. And I'll bring it up. Here's the strategic plan as you see it normally. We're going to be talking about teaching and learning, talking about the budget and finance, and then we're going to focus on facilities and district growth. So like I said before, we've already completed 2 years of the 5-year plan. When I came before you last time, part of that was to get a lease going for some Chromebooks. So that was one of the impetuses to start a 5-year plan for spending. We're 2 years into that. So it's important that we kind of realize that. There are some cost adjustments that I'd like to show you. And the third part is there's more money coming into the technology plan based on the referendum costs that were given to me. So we have to make some plans on how we're going to spend that money. Yes?
Quick question, there's 1,200 Chromebooks.
Yes.
That was purchased at one time, right? Or are those?
It's a 4-year lease, so
But all 1,200 came in at once.
Yes, yes, yeah. So they're here for the 4 years and they came in at once, and then they're all going to leave at once. Lastly, I'd like to align some of the technology with other district policies and priorities. So when I first came before you, we talked about some major purchases that we make. If you look at computers, back 2 years ago, we were spending about $643 per desktop computer. Currently, we spend quite a bit less, $153 less per unit with desktop computers. Desktop computers are going to go down continually, but they're getting phased out. They're not always going to be around. We're seeing more mobile technologies. Like everything technology, things get smaller and less expensive. With desktop computers, we're gonna continue to buy them, but realize that now we're stretching our dollars more because technology does that. Monitors, you can see, have gone down. Chromebooks, we've been looking at Chromebooks as a major computing unit for our students to use. You can see that's gone down quite a bit too. We buy a lot of projectors every year. You can see that those prices also gone down.
So the projectors, is that like the smart boards or the smart board replacements?
Projectors are what shine onto the smart board.
Okay.
But I'll talk about smart
Okay.
boards some. And you can see at the bottom here, we have to kind of look at smart boards versus interactive flat panels, the J-touches. So that's going to be a discussion that the board and some of the committees will have to talk about.
So one of the things is to kind of, for folks who aren't familiar with the smart board has two parts. It has the board on the wall.
Yes.
And the projector.
Correct.
The board isn't what wears out, it's the projector.
I get
Right.
it.
The boards are pretty, there's no moving parts. They just, when you buy them, unless they get damaged, they pretty much stay the way they are.
Okay.
So, like I said, evolution of technology. You can see some things that have evolved, some of them good, smaller, cheaper, better. Here's some predictions. Now, these aren't necessarily my predictions. These are ones that I've looked up, but I kind of agree with most of these. Desktop computers in general are kind of disappearing. If you go to a Best Buy right now and try to buy a desktop computer, you're not going to find that there's a lot there. You're going to find laptops, you're going to find tablets, you're going to find smaller kind of units that are mobile. Smartboards. We have not bought a smartboard in 2 years. I'm guessing we will probably never buy another smartboard. It's old technology. The projectors are what we purchase. So when a projector goes out, right now we will put a new projector in just because it will continue to work with that smartboard. But as things evolve, even the smartboards will start to go away. CDs and DVDs are going away. Traditional printing and printers. Obviously, we need a wired network. We still have a basic need for wired computers. But on any given day, most of the devices that are on our network are wireless. So we have, there's a little bit of a balance there. The wired network isn't going away. Just how many things we plug into it is going to be less and less. Traditional operating systems, Android and iOS are kind of taking over the market there. So what's coming down the pike? So this is, again, not my opinion. These are things that you can see in the world that are evolving as far as technology goes. There's a certain kind of force out there that's called the Internet of Things. Has anyone heard of the Internet of Things? So yeah, it's what is happening in the world today is anything that can be connected to a network, we are connecting it to a network. It's kind of like the smart house, where you can control the lights, the heating, just about anything in your house, music, whatever, not even being in your house. You can control it over the internet. Amazon Echo is one of the things that you can buy that, and Alexa will do just about anything for you, from ordering a pizza to delivering a Uber to your driveway. So that's kind of the world we're living in, is more and more things are going to get connected to the internet. And things that you wouldn't even think could or should be connected to the internet are going to be connected to the internet. So how does that affect what we do? Well, there's 6 things here that are going to they're going to creep into and already some of them are creeping into our educational system. So augmented reality is one of the things that you're seeing coming about. I'm not talking about virtual reality. Virtual reality, if everyone thinks about virtual reality, is when you put the goggles in on your face and you're kind of immersed in a new world. You kind of experience whatever world the goggles show you, that's where you're at. And so you move and experience what's in there. That's going to come about, but I don't know that that's going to change education as much as augmented reality. Augmented reality is taking the real world and putting something digital in it so that you're still in the real world, but now you're interfacing with something that's digital. So an example of that would be like the infamous Pokemon Go. Okay, there's Pokemon Go. You're on your phone, you're walking around, your camera on your phone is showing you the real world, but then something digital comes up that you have to react with, all right? That was the allure of Pokemon Go. So if you've never played Pokemon Go, which I'm guessing not many of you have, that's what that was. Another part of augmented reality, Snapchat. So you can Snapchat your friends, and Snapchat has filters on it where you take a picture or a video of yourself real time. You can now send it and put a filter on so that you look like a little puppy dog. So that's a augmented reality. So it's a cute little girl, my granddaughter, and I took a picture of her and turned her into a puppy dog. This is what she really looks like in real life. So this is her reality. That's her without the puppy dog face. There are other parts of augmented reality that have some practical uses. So if we look at augmented reality, a lot of companies are using augmented reality to help sell things. So Lego, if you go into a store with an app for Lego, you can take a picture of the box, scan the box, and on your phone a 3D model will come up so you can interact with that model before you buy it and see exactly what you're getting. One other company that's using augmented reality is IKEA. All of their catalogs, IKEA's catalogs, have an augmented reality version to them. So if you take an IKEA catalog home, they'll give you an app. You can scan a couch, and then with your phone, you can take and see where that couch
Would fit.
fits in your living room. Or you can have some fun with it and let your son look like he's picking it up. Converse is also using augmented reality. You can buy their app and scan in whatever shoe you want to buy, and then you can look down at your foot and see what it's going to look like before you buy it. So it gives you an idea. There are lots of different ways that we're using augmented reality. Obviously in the marketplaces where it's kind of taken hold, but there's going to be definitely some hooks for education as we move forward. With some of our iPads, kids are already starting to look at ways that we can use some of the augmented reality. Another thing that's coming down the pike is makerspace innovation centers. We have a beautiful innovation center here. Some of the schools have some makerspace kind of things that are going on. So that's coming. 3D printing. We're already doing cloud computing. Social networking for collaboration. We're not doing a lot of that, but I see that coming for the Waunakee School District. Social networking is going to be more and more implemented in educational spaces as we move forward. Multi-touch screens, we already have J-touches. So those are coming in place, taking over the spot where the smart boards were as a presentation, a place where teachers can now show the lessons, have the students interact with the board, be involved with that. Game-based learning, we've implemented some of that also. Chromebooks. So this is a graph of the last 5 years as it pertains to Chromebooks. If you look at 5 years ago, 2012-13, we had 0 Chromebooks in this district. A year later, we started the Google Apps for Education interface, basically that application for all the students to use, all the drives, all the mail, email, all those things were put into place. We bought 32 Chromebooks that year. We let people just play with the Chromebooks. We didn't need the Chromebooks because you could be part of Google Apps for Education on any computer. All you had to do is bring up the Chrome browser. So the Chromebook was really not necessarily central to that change or shift for us, but we wanted to see what they were like. So the first year we bought 32 and we played with them. We still had all the Google Apps for Education. We switched to Gmail. Everybody was starting to use Drive and all of the different tools that Google Apps for Education had. The next year we bought 260 based on the fact that people were enjoying the Chromebook for a number of reasons. The Chromebook boots up in less than 8 seconds. It also has the operating system of Chrome. So there was no having to log into a computer, get on a browser, log into the browser now because you have to be on Google Apps for Education. Now start your lesson. Chromebooks allowed our teachers to, you want to get into Chrome? Open up, you're in 8 seconds. Instructional time, you're right in, you're doing it right away. However, you'll see then the next year, we leased, or the next year we bought 260. The next year we leased, which is the 1,200 that we leased. So you can see we didn't really buy any that year. The 2015-16 school year, we pretty much stayed pat with the 260 that we had purchased the year before and the 32 that we had purchased the year before. So there was an infusion of Chromebooks that year, but we didn't really purchase any. We leased those and we stayed pat with the 260 and the 32. This year, we're not even completed this year, and you can see that we have purchased 650 additional Chromebooks. So it's obvious that Chromebooks have caught on, and they are becoming the default device for the classroom. And I think that there's a number of reasons for that. One of them is it's still very easy to get into them. They boot up quickly. They have the Chrome OS on them, and it's just a very easy interface for our teachers and students to use. The thing that's also appealing to them for me is that you can see that they're extremely cheap. One of the reasons that we had so many purchased this year is because before December, there was a deal on Chromebooks for $159. You saw in the slides before, we pay a little bit more than that. So we were saving about $40 a Chromebook. So I went out to the principals and said, this is a good opportunity. These are really good Chromebooks. Let's see if we can, buy some and make it a better deal for everyone.
So were those refurbished or were they?
No, those were brand new. It was a end of, the models that we purchased are Lenovo N21s. It was the N22s were coming out, and so they were selling the N21s, and now they're already to the N23s. So I'm glad that we purchased those. It was basically an end of life or end of model life. So they had a bunch of them in the channel, and they wanted to get rid of them quickly, and it was just an educational deal. So a lot of people took advantage of that deal at that time. So
Mark has a question.
yes.
How's the durability of those compared to a laptop computer?
The durability in comparison to a laptop is quite a bit more. There's a couple of things that are good about a Chromebook that a laptop is less durable. One of them is Chromebooks do not have any moving parts. All laptops have drives on them, unless you buy a solid state drive, a drive that spins. Most laptops create enough heat that they have to have a fan inside of them. So there's 2 moving parts in there that will wear out. They wear out quite quickly in comparison to a Chromebook that doesn't have any moving parts. It's all solid state. The other part of a Chromebook that makes it more durable is the ones that we buy are ruggedized. So there are ruggedized models and there's consumer models. The ruggedized models have a bigger bezel around the screen. So if you bump it, the screen isn't likely to get damaged because it has that extra real estate, that extra plastic. Whereas if you look at laptops, they want to optimize the screen size. So you have a very thin bezel, which then makes it, when you put it in the hands of a kid, they bump it once, you crack them. In any of these, most of the money that any repair is in the screen. The screen is really the most expensive part of the laptop or Chromebook. So we've had pretty good luck with the ones that we leased. I believe we had to repair 24 last year out of 1,200. And most of those were keyboard issues where a key would pop off. We had a couple that were dropped. We had one that was, someone slammed the screen with a pencil inside, so we had to replace the screen. And so those are the kind of things that happen. But we've had much less than a 10% repair rate. But that's a good question.
Herb, you had talked about with our admin team the other day about a point in time where age-wise it'll stop working.
Correct.
So can you just share that with the board?
Sure. Chromebooks have a 5-year span of life. After 5 years, they stop working. The OS no longer updates, and the functionality of the Chromebook becomes pretty much zero. So Chromebooks have a end of life that, unlike, when we buy a laptop, we try to keep them for 5 years. We have been able to keep some of our laptops for 7 years because we put, new drives in them, we put more memory in them, we put new batteries in them, those kind of things. So Chromebooks, they're cheap, but they definitely have a finite amount of time that we can use them. So that happens.
Gary, did you have a
So
question?
our costs been going down. How did our lease, what was our cost when we leased? Do you remember?
Steve?
It's about 210,000 per year for 4 years.
You're talking a cost per unit?
Yeah.
Oh, per unit, I'm not sure what they were each individually.
1,200 units at
Yeah, I don't know what the exact price was on the units.
Oh, 840 divided by 1,200?
Sure, that would be it.
But there's,
Say again?
840 basically divided by...
Yes, you're right, Jack. There
There's
is
interest
interest.
rate.
isn't there?
There was an interest rate.
But it's gotta be relatively cheap.
Yeah, I believe
Inexpensive.
inexpensive, yeah. I think at the very end of it, I think interest-wise, we're going to pay about $4,000 to $5,000 in interest. That's about it.
So if I look at this chart, it looks like you've got 2,500 Chromebooks.
That's about right.
We've got about 4,500 students. Is it your plan that we're gonna have a Chromebook for every kid?
Boy, I don't know that that's my plan. I think that we have to talk about that. I don't see us, number one, we don't have a Google Apps for Education for students that are in K 1, 2, or 3. So K through 3, they don't really get to use the Google Apps for Education. So we wouldn't want them to have Chromebooks. However, I would add to that, there is creep happening. So at the elementary levels, if you see, most of the purchases that happened this year happened at the high school and happened at the elementary level, because at the high school, they didn't get any of the leased ones. The elementaries each got one cart of the leased ones. So most of the leased computers went to the middle school and to the intermediate. And so all of the purchases that you're seeing that are happening this year are happening on those ends. And at the elementary, we're seeing creep. It's like the third graders are now using them.
Herb, if you go to the next slide, you'll answer Jack's question.
Okay. So this is kind of what you're talking about. We don't want to call it one-to-one. We want to call it a mobile learning environment. So we need to discuss what it is that we're really doing with all of these devices. I think that there is a need for more devices. Having those 1,200 showed us that was a good infusion of technology, but it didn't allow the teachers the freedom to have them in the kids' hands when they really always want them to have them in their hands. So any given day, a teacher may only need it for 15 minutes out of a 45-minute period. So they have to now check out one of those carts, and they're only using it for 15 minutes out of their period, and then the rest of it is some other type of instruction, but then that cart's in there for the other 30 minutes, and so some other teacher might want that during that time. So one-to-one or a mobile learning environment, I think we're moving that way. However, this is not a technology discussion. This is a curriculum discussion. So what we really need to do is, my recommendation at the bottom there is, we really need to have a deeper discussion with the curriculum committee next year to talk about this, because we have 2 years of this lease. So we're good with what we've got now. But 2 years from now, when we take 1,200 Chromebooks away, the teachers here are gonna be expecting something to replace those. And however we replace them and what we replace them with is really up to the curriculum committee, I think.
Mark, you had a question.
Going back to your footnotes from the previous pane, so that most of the purchases were either by department or PTO funds.
Correct.
So, are you aware, or is there an equity in the number of units available from school to school where the PTOs have been involved and purchased them, or do we have some kids with less opportunity because of that?
I think we're close to a tipping point that the inequity is gonna be there in the next couple of years. Right now, I would say it's fairly equitable, but that equitable point is tipping. It's gonna tip.
So that'll need to be part of that
Correct.
conversation as well.
Correct. Correct.
If I can add a couple of things. One of the things that we talked about with our full administrative team this past week was, we talked about the 650 that were purchased. Was kind of the question of why and where. What are they being used for? So many of them are an access piece. So you start to look at the middle school and high school, it's classrooms that are using them more, finding that that is a excellent tool for them to be using more in the classrooms than we initially kind of envisioned as the 1,200 were outlined. There were also things that we're having where you're starting to see some things move a little bit further down into elementary than where we necessarily thought they were going to be.
Right.
So even though we don't have a Google account for every kid at the elementary, we do have Chromebooks that are finding their way into more of the elementary classrooms.
Correct.
Partially is that they're also doing some of their state assessment on those. And part of it is they are doing some writing and some other things in the classroom. What I've heard from our admin staff was they're also trying to give the kids an introduction to some of those pieces, so the first time they see it isn't during their state assessment time so that they're not assessing a technology piece, they're assessing what the kids are asking. But there's definitely a usage there. So when you go to kind of Herb's last point here, I completely agree with that. That is something that we need to think about with regards to what are our curricular needs that are driving technology. I think that fits in kind of concurrently with what Mark is talking about, and that's going to really kind of fall into another topic that Budget Committee was talking about with Steve, was purchasing policies. And supply budgets, purchasing policies,
Right.
and all of these things I think are going to converge together. So I think that's an excellent conversation. We need to have that done next year because the following year we come off of that lease and we need to have a plan for what we do. So I think when you move forward further into Herb's presentation, you're going to see some, he's not expending all the dollars that he has available to him each year. Part of it is to address some of the unknowns of where we're going here. But I think
Right.
we need to take some time with the curriculum committee to take a look at where do we want to be ending up. I
Right.
think part of that conversation needs to include what do we want technology to look like at different grade levels, and build some standards as far as so we can build that consistency that I think Mark was alluding to, so we don't get out of balance just because we have one school or some schools who have more PTO funds than others.
That's
So that's
true.
a piece that we've got to really merge all those together, which makes it a pretty
Right.
big conversation.
The other, oh, go ahead.
I think Dave had a question.
Wasn't there a point when we were first discussing one-on-one policy a couple of years ago,
Mhm.
one-to-one, and there was gonna be kind of a test group done
Mhm.
in one of the grades?
Mhm.
Was that done?
It is. That's the fifth, sixth grade classes. They have 2-to-1, and we're looking at how they deal with the 2-to-1 kind of situation, because now that they're in the villages this year, they have one cart, 30 Chromebooks for every other classroom. So there's 4 in a village, so they have 2 carts in there. So there's a lot of ways that I'm seeing that they're able to leverage that much access. Whereas in the middle school, they have like 2 or 3 carts per department. And what you see happening there is some of the teachers are really ready for those, and they like have them all the time. And then the other teachers are kind of like by default not getting as much access. So we're using the 5th, 6th grade as kind of that control group to see how one-to-one might work, or how more mobile learning environment would be more advantageous. The other part of this, and we're kind of focusing on Chromebooks, we do still buy iPads, and there are iPads in all of our schools. They have kind of become the default for the K through 3 group. There's a lot of lessons that fit in there, and they are using them. But Randy is right. The 3rd graders are starting to get into the Google Apps for Education just because of state testing and some other...
Keyboarding starts at 3rd grade.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of reasons to say iPad's good for some lessons for a 3rd grader, but a Chromebook really fits much better.
You have things that are fitting in with Project Lead the Way launch.
Yes,
program and some of those
launch
things.
requires that we have an iPad, so, yeah, there are those things.
Gary, you had something.
Yeah, I would hope that, a couple things. One is, the 300,000 we did with the referendum stuff, I would assume that that's more of a saving like we did with capital projects, so that when this comes, you save that and expand that when that lease is up. It would be an example of a thing where you make sure you save, so we're not having a $210,000 hit that year,
Right.
like it was before, is one thing. Technology always scares me. I guess I'm really disappointed with the smart boards, because there was such a push for that a few years back, and now we're hearing they're obsolete. And that's what always scares me about technology. It changes so fast. By the time you get something,
I would
it's gone and it's whatever. And
I get that. They're not obsolete, Gary. They're just not they're not the
State-of-the-art.
current state of the art.
But
Yes.
they're 10 years old.
Some of them are 10 years old.
Yeah.
If you go around the
well,
district,
we bought a bunch of them.
right,
after that.
right. And so, but we're not buying them anymore, but we're gonna use the ones that we got. We're gonna leverage the ones that we got until, we'll wring just about every drip of sweat out of those that we can get. But the thing is that the part of the smart board that's the important part is the projector. The smart board is just it's a board.
And interact.
What the
Yeah.
smart board does isn't going away. We're just doing, it's getting replaced with a different type of
Right.
technology than a
Correct.
2-part technology.
Yeah.
So some of the interactiveness of a smart board
Right.
is still there's new technologies coming in that can do that better.
Right. So for instance,
I know, but my point is just that when you're chasing that all the time, it's a
Right.
tough animal to catch.
oh, you'll never catch it. Technology, you'll never catch.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be something new. They're always going to be pushing the envelope. And so, in my position, I have to kind of weigh what are the things that are coming down the pike that are worth chasing, and what are the things that aren't going to pan out and become important to education. So this augmented reality, I think that's going to be huge. But how is that going to surface? How is that going to play out? I don't know. And what is that going to cost us? I couldn't even venture a guess. But there's going to be some things included with that we're going to have to consider.
Dave, did you have something else?
Just on that one-to-one thing, I remember one of the major thoughts about that, especially if it gets into the high school
Yes.
and stuff, is the concept of whether they provided their own device.
Correct.
That's
And
what's
us,
gonna be
and
mine.
I haven't heard anything since that discussion about, 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And have you still been watching that?
Sure.
Or I'll tell you now, as we get into 27-18,
Right.
start talking about, that's something we've got to look at even harder.
It
to
is.
make sure that there's a way to get to one-to-one, but that parents and stuff and kids who have their own stuff and want to be able to use it, we just got to have a standard.
Sure.
And I think right
I agree.
now, I mean, just like it seems like the standard is starting to become a Chromebook. Well, or right now that's where we're at, kind of.
It is.
But we got iPads floating around, so
We do.
at some point,
We do.
we've got to decide where we're going, at least for the next.
Any given
4 to
day, I
5
will
years.
see a bunch of kids come in with Surfaces. So kids are bringing whatever they have, and they much prefer what they own to what we would give them.
My daughter has her.
Yeah.
Right.
Mark, did you have something?
Well, and in conjunction with what Dave mentioned, we talk about one-to-one, but has there been discussion, or will there be discussion about providing the resource to the socioeconomic groups that don't have access
Yes.
at home?
Yes.
Because to me, they're the critical ones
Yep.
who don't
Yep.
have the resource. And
Yeah.
if we're gonna try to close the
Yep,
gap.
yep.
yeah.
And-
Not
and-
just at school.
Right.
It's gotta go home.
At home, yes.
Well,
The-
then they might not have internet.
Yeah, exactly, and there are some ways for us to provide that. There's a couple of different technologies that school districts use for free and reduced or socially economic disadvantaged students to get internet on a nightly basis. There's these units that are called Khajiits, and we could buy them for $25. We would allow a student to go into the library and check it out for the night, not forever, for the night when they need it. They would have that internet access based on this
And
basically
at
hot
the state
point.
convention, another one of the major internet providers has a similar program.
Correct.
Where if you
There's a lot
qualify
of
for
Yep.
free and reduced, you can get
Yes.
internet access. at
Correct.
home. But I get how the whole bring your own device, it kind of opens up as many cans of worms
It
as
does.
it potentially solves.
Yes.
But on the other hand, that doesn't mean it still isn't something we could be exploring. It's
right.
just how you do that.
At the high school, and Dave, when I talked about this, we said that we were going to open BYOD for the high school, and we have. But it's made very short inroads, only because there are a lot of cans of worms to talk about. Some kids come in with a Surface. Other kids want to use their phones. Most of the kids want to use their phones. And some of the teachers allow them to use the phones in certain situations. There are some situations in a classroom where a phone makes perfect sense. When teachers are doing some of the apps that work real well, like Kahoot is one that a lot of the teachers use. It's a real quick and dirty way to do a quiz, a poll, to kind of get a gauge of, are the students understanding what I'm trying to teach them? They will do a Kahoot, the kids bring out their phones, everybody, But now it brings up, not everybody has a phone. What about the student that doesn't have a phone? How do we deal with that? So BYOD is great, and it would be an excellent discussion to have, but there's lots of facets to it that we have to be aware of.
Okay, I'm going to try to help you move along here.
Yes, very good. All right, so this is the slam dunk part of the presentation. These are the things that I'm going to try to plan for with the additional money that the referendum has allotted me. So those are 4 items there. They really have more to do with things that we did during the referendum that changed the infrastructure, and some of them are obviously facility things, but think about the Internet of Everything. We're hooking everything that we can into the network as we can. That allows us more control, and there's a lot of cost cutting that will be involved in that. VoIP is the first one. I was planning on not doing a whole big VoIP rollout. I was going to try to do 1 or 2 schools a year or a summer. But with talking with Randy and Steve, we felt like this summer, let's just do everyone. One of the reasons being is, if you remember back in January when we had our budget meeting, you'll see that Waunakee is the largest bar there. We are significantly more than any other school with our comparables. We're almost triple what McFarland spends on communications. I think that if we go to VoIP this summer, a very small estimate would be that we're going to save 50 to 75% in 1 year. So the return on investment to going to VoIP is going to be about a 1.5 to maybe a 2-year payback. So it's a no-brainer in my estimation. So it exists. We can work on the existing network. It has a large range of features. It's just it's a way to go. We already have 3 buildings that are using it, so we're going to try to do VoIP this summer if we can.
So in a nutshell, what that is getting rid of landlines basically and using some type of internet access for our regular phone service
Correct.
in the classrooms
Correct.
and so on. Okay.
Classrooms, offices, everyone will have an internet phone, basically. Door access. Now, we switched over the door access to the RS2 system for the buildings that were touched during the referendum. The other buildings do not have an RS2. They have the old Velocity system. The old Velocity system works fine. What we're talking about is scanning your card in to get into a building. It's not a mission critical thing. It's a nice to have. It'll be nice when we're all on the same system, but it's not that critical because the 2 systems that we have both work, and they both work fine. So we'll hopefully be able to do all the buildings the summer of 2018. We'll all be on the RS2 system, but it's not as critical, I think, as the VoIP system. clock speakers, the PAs, you'll see there's an example of the ones that we put in all the new construction that we did. This is going to be a hold back and do more kind of studying on what it is that we want to do. Currently, the high school and Arboretum have perfectly good clock PA systems. Their systems are fairly new. PA systems last 20 years, 25 years. They just don't go out. They just don't, they last. So for the high school and Arboretum, 5 to 7 years from now, their PA systems will still be fine. So we really don't need to talk about those now. We do need to address the middle school. Their PA system is at the end of its life. Joe and I talked about some things that we could do. I'm proposing that this coming summer, I will put some money into theirs to upgrade it so that it will last for a while. But in reality, the whole clock speaker PA system, this is more for the long-range facility plan, something that the board will deal with as other projects come forth.
And next month, you'll be hearing from Joe on the facilities aspect of it.
Correct.
So there'll be a little bit of overlap here.
Security cameras, we put security cameras in every building. We totaled 161 brand new cameras. You can see the breakdown, 75 exterior, 65 interior, 23 are 360-degree coverage cameras. We upgraded the servers, we upgraded the software. We're working to connect the Waunakee PD. Basically, the security camera system's good. However, the high school had a lot of cameras that were old. Interior cameras can last 10 to 15 years. Exterior cameras, if you get 10 years out of an exterior camera, it's pretty good. So you'll see in my budget, I'm going to propose that we update some of the high school exterior cameras in the next 3 years. But for the most part, we're pretty good. We have well over 300 cameras district-wide, and everything, all the feedback that I've gotten from principals is that it was a great idea that we did that, and they appreciate that have that as a resource for them. One of the other things that I've been doing is trying to look at my two network guys, my administrator and my engineer. They have a lot of overlap in their job duties. This last spring, Connie Beth and I and the two people that were in this position, we kind of looked at the responsibilities and tried to reorganize those two positions. I think we made some pretty good inroads on that. There still is going to be some overlap in their responsibilities, but for the most part, you can see that we have some definite job description type of things that each one of them is going to be responsible for. There'll still be some cross-training, like I said, but for the most part, we have them pretty much realigned with what their responsibilities are. Additional staff. We were able to put a full-time person at the intermediate, which is nice. They've never had a full-time person. They always had a person they shared at Heritage just because they were under the same roof. Now Heritage and Arboretum have part-time people as their tech support. We added one district-level support person. It was Taylor Hogue. He was the high school person. He is now works with Brian Berger as the district-level support. So they work in all the buildings. One of the things that Steve and Randy and I talked about is possibly getting me and Joe a person that we could share for administrative assistant kind of work. Right now, I rely on Barb Selverson at the high school. I share her with all the high school staff. I feel bad because I do a lot more purchasing than a lot of the other people there, so I rely on her quite often to do some of my purchase orders and some of my other organization kind of things. So it would be nice if Joe and I had our own person that could do that. Yes?
Herb, something we've been talking about a lot is being able to attract and retain staff.
Yeah. Yes.
We don't get the opportunity to talk about your staff very often.
Correct.
So how are we doing market-wise? Are we compatible with the area? Are you finding the people we need to have?
Well, and I've said this to Randy and Steve and Connie quite often. Our network guys, they're, as far as employees go, they're probably the most unique employees we have in the district. They have a unique skill set that, they're hard to find, and the private sector sucks them up pretty quickly because the pay is better and many times the workload is less. And so it's hard to keep them around. We've been fairly lucky since I've been here. We've had one network engineer, and we've had 2 network administrators, which is pretty good in the 5 years that I've been here. But now we just lost Rich Huck, so we're looking for a new network engineer. We can't pay them what the going wage is in the industry, but there are some other things that we offer that I think we can get some quality people. You know, it's one of those things. Technology it's always changing, and there's always new problems. And so when you find people that are good, it's good to hold on to them. It's just in the technology field, it's near impossible to keep them for any length of time. You don't see too many network administrators that have been at a place for over 15 years. It just doesn't happen. So the rest of my staff, I think, are doing fairly well. There are some ongoing kind of PD issues that we have to address, keeping their skills up, learning some of the new systems that we have. You know, we never had to deal with doors before. We never had to deal a lot with cameras. We didn't have to deal a lot with a VoIP system. We've asked for all of those systems, but you know, sometimes it's okay, now we have to stand and deliver. These are our systems. The door system no longer belongs to just facilities. It belongs to both of us. So there's those kind of things too that we're asking them to do more with less. So
As I shared with the board previously, I think that some of the things that with Herb's world and Joe's world have grown together. And you can
Yes.
see that through the second part of this presentation as far as some of the things where they're merging those.
So here's the big goals for the next 2 years, basically deploy VoIP, get the door system together, try to determine the best course of action for the clock PA systems, start discussing with the curriculum people how we can involve a mobile learning environment. We're right now working on our next tech plan, which is called the Future Ready Plan, which I really think is more of a learning plan than a tech plan. Continue to work with my staff to define what they do, and then 2 years from now, I'd like to come back and re-examine where we're at with the 5-year plan. There's just the big numbers of what we're looking at. You'll notice that my budget says $550,000. That's because I have about $250,000 of discretionary funds from my regular budget, what my running budget is now. So with the addition of that $300 from the referendum, gives me that bottom line for the next 5 years. You'll see that there's a lot of heavy spending the first 2 years because of the VoIP system and because of the door system. Point out that the security cameras, I've put a line in there only because we have to think about replacing some of the exterior cameras at the high school, especially ones that are in parking lot. If you ever drive through the parking lot and you see the big white ones that are hanging off poles, those ones have heaters in them because they freeze up during the winter. So they have a heater in them, which also makes them wear out quicker. So we replace those quite regularly. So exterior cameras, you can see that I have a running budget there, increasing every year, not just for the high school, but that 3rd or 4th year, Prairie has had those cameras for now 5 or 6 years, along with the new building and with Heritage. So, any questions? Yes.
And I know it's later in our agenda, we're gonna be talking about the new scoreboard.
Yes.
Will that fall under your?
Boy, I don't know how much. I'm sure there'll be some. I'm sure there'll be some of it. Well, we'll have to network it.
Yeah,
We'll have
but
to.
that whole, I mean, I understand that they wanna,
Right.
there's a significant amount of videoing
There
on
is.
that board.
Yes, I'm sure there will be some kind of technology that we'll either have to be part of the installation or how it's used or how it's deployed. Yeah.
And I think, Joan, I think Aaron will probably talked about a little bit of kind of the training that goes along with that and what that requires.
I wondered when I read that, who is going to keep that going?
Yeah.
Sure.
I think they're also trying to tie that into some of the mass media classes and some of the things in high school.
But then it's training somebody every
Right,
year.
right, correct.
Yeah.
So it's not like Wrigley Field where they put a guy in there?
Right.
So thank you, Herb. That
You bet.
was a really
Thank you.
complete presentation. I think we had lots of good questions. and
Yes. Thank you.
Joan's question kind of segues into
Yep.
the next item on the agenda, which is discussion of the Warrior Stadium project update. And the first piece of that we're going to talk about is the scoreboard recommendation.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask Aaron to step forward because he's done the bulk of the work from the district's perspective on the scoreboard. You find in your packet a report that Aaron put together. So Aaron, if you can just walk through a few of the highlights in your recommendation, then we can take questions from the board.
Sure. You know, when we originally started talking about improvements to Warrior Stadium, one of the conversations that came up was a video board. That was kind of a wish list item, or an item we would really like to have. And then as we kind of learned more and more about it, we really saw it as a positive, not just for the teams playing, but actually as a community piece. And so I kind of sketched out really 3 or 4 reasons why I think this is a way for Waunakee to go, and a way for it to promote itself, and to tie our athletic events, or events that happen in Warrior Stadium, to the curriculum. So the first part was really, you know, we do all of these things. We have the big banners for parents. Now, you know, Randy's daughter's a cheerleader, and they're buying those posters, and now we put them up on the screens, and the booster clubs like those ideas and those ways to promote the kids. But then as we started thinking about it, well, why would we just be promoting our athletes and celebrating our seniors? We could bring in our FBLA, our forensics team, who our middle school, or Arboretum PTO is going to have an ice cream social as their fundraiser, as one way to get the word out there. We now have this kind of captive audience on whether it's a Friday night football game, or in the spring we have a track meet in there, or if we have a lacrosse game in there. Now we have an audience there to want to promote these things that are going on in the district, but then also to celebrate our kids. We have so many good things going on that we have something here where we have a really great way to promote those kids. So we had that. The next thing, as we started talking with a couple of the different companies that make these boards, and looking at the options out there, one of the options that appealed to us, as part of the recommendation we're making, is this video scoreboard that's fully customizable. So when you walk in, whether you walk into a football game, or you walk into a lacrosse game, or you walk into a track meet, or you walk into a soccer game, when you look at that scoreboard, currently if we host lacrosse on there, if we host something else on there, you look at the scoreboard, it says quarter, down, distance, has a little football icon for who has possession. And like it or not, if you're somebody else using that facility, and you don't necessarily it doesn't necessarily feel like home. Well, this is a way for when you walk in there, it is for those 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever you're using it, it's your home. And now when lacrosse uses that facility, when track uses that facility, that board is can be customized to their place, to them.
Didn't we approve this board at the 27th meeting?
No.
No, we didn't.
Because that was one of the budget line items.
It was one of them it was one of the budget line items, but what we approved was to move forward with all the other aspects of the field, because they were still working on the
Grants and funding.
Final price.
some of the funding and some of the specific board specifics.
Options.
So we said we would bring that back here. So that's correct.
And then finally, one of the last things that really appealed to us was conversations with some of our teaching staff, and our class in particular, our mass media class, and their ability to use this as a curriculum thing. We talk about 21st century skills. It's something Herb probably knows a lot about, but here we actually have, instead of just, okay, we're going to make a YouTube video, we're going to put it on YouTube, and your classmates are going to see it on Thursday when you show the 5-minute video to everybody. Now it's a little bit more pressure. We're going to have, 1,700 people, 200, whatever it might be, watching your content, but it really ties that in. And with the board that we recommend, that we're recommending, the Daktronics one, they actually will certify kids, certified students in operations of the board and maintenance of the board. So if they were to say go to almost any WEAC school, UW Oshkosh, UW Whitewater, any of those schools, Madison, they could actually go walk into the athletic department and say, I am certified by Daktronics to run your video board, I'd like to work for you. So there's that
So do
part
they
of
do
it.
that for free?
That's part of their, yep, that's part of the deal when you purchase this.
And it's ongoing?
It's, yep. For as long as we have the Daktronics board. You know, so if we, when we go to replace, if we
That
switch
is
over to
awesome.
something else, no, I didn't, yeah, but,
Right.
Aaron?
Yeah.
So with that, does that also come with the video equipment to be able to broadcast on the board, or is that?
We have that current
We have
equipment.
the
Like
capability?
a camera and things like that, we would have to purchase. We currently have that hardware.
Okay.
Right now, we have no plans to be videoing the game and then
I'm saying, well, like
showing.
this here looks
It's
like,
simply
you know, and
placed.
then going on, and so, but we would not be doing that. kind of-
That's, you know, part of their marketing materials is to show,
Yeah.
show that option, but that's not in our plan in the beginning. Certainly not part of our plan.
Yeah, I like how you pointed that out. So you could give highlights though of like the state game that happened last weekend in a different sport.
Yeah,
Not-
so.
Not meant as a video replay on the ref's call kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's different.
So, yeah, we
Yeah.
could do, yeah, we could actually do, and I might get this term incorrect here, so, I believe they called it like a flash video. Basically, it's like just a highlight reel, and yeah, it could be, you know, of whatever, you know, of the different sports that went on, and we could show that, or, lacrosse, you know, if we have some kids, they make the lacrosse one, they can have that during their pregame warm. So that's part of it, that's possible, that's all preloaded on the controller in
Right,
the press box.
right.
That's, yeah.
Mark.
First of all, again, I'm just pretty overwhelmed by the number of businesses who have been willing to step up. It's pretty impressive, all from your part. Does that give them exclusive use of the board, or would there be opportunities, since it is this digital board, to sell additional advertising on the board during the various seasons?
So in the beginning, during the repayment period or the payment period, they would have their commercials, their advertising. So our marketing class or whoever will be working with those specific companies or businesses. After that is done, then yes, we would be opening up to, it could get opened up to other local businesses.
Yes,
During
so
the
that would
first
be
3
contracted
years,
for a
it's
term.
already done.
4 years. But marketing will still get that same experience of working with those. I think, if I'm looking at this, I believe it's 9 companies.
Well, concern, I guess, a thought that hit me was, we talked at our last meeting, I think, about
Yeah.
escrowing 30,000 from the gates.
Yeah.
But I would think that we might want to look at directing whatever advertising comes from this resource to, until that future
Yeah.
need is met as well.
Yes, that would be an idea there.
Because I totally agree with you, because we talked about the 30 as a turf replacement. You're
Yeah.
talking about an item here that you end up replacing at some point too, and so to set up that fund separate, to have replacement of these 2 items there, I think is hugely important, so that's a good point.
But that is a good question. What does Daktronics tell you is a lifespan of the board? What's the life expectancy?
So you're looking at about 15 years, is what they will tell you. But, you know, it's, you know, that's the screen, the thing that we're looking at, those are LED lights, so they're not gonna burn out necessarily unless they get hit by something. But that's kind of what they look at, or what their life expectancy
Okay.
is of their machine. To go along with that, the hardware, all the processing hardware, all that is kept in the press box. And part of the price and part of the reason why it is where it's at is they've actually built redundancies into that. So if for some reason the main processor went out or something happened there or failed during the game, there's actually a backup processor
Wow.
in that automatically kicks on. So to the fans, the spectators there, they wouldn't see any interruption in the actual scoreboard mechanism, and it would continue to operate that way. You had asked about technology and the connection. So the way that's connected, so everything, the only quote-unquote moving parts out there are the LEDs on there, and they're about 1 foot by 1 foot squares, and they're each modular, so they could pull out. So if something were to happen to one, we actually get, it comes out to be about 8 or so extra modulars of it. And so if something were to happen, one went out right in the middle, it doesn't affect the ones around it, because there's redundancies built in to piggyback off of each other. So there would be a black square there for the night, but they will train our district electrician how to swap that out and put the replacement in. So they'll actually give us extras to start with to replace those out. And then how it's connected, there's the power going to it, but then it's fiber optic cable that goes from the press box out to the scoreboard. That's how it communicates and sends the information to the board. Yeah.
So do you have, is there an automatic timer, like for track, if you're doing sprints and distance, is it?
It wouldn't be the official timer, but yes, you could set up a time. It wouldn't be the official time.
Right, but do we have that equipment, or will they turn it on when the gun goes off?
Yeah. We, right now, we would have to turn it on when the gun goes off.
Is there that switch by the timers to do that?
What's that?
Is there that link by the timers to do that?
That would have to be the timing system that they would purchase. And without talking with Track, I'd be talking to a place of not knowing. What I do know at this point is that we would be able to display and put up the finish and the finish times, and we could actually put a camera on there and show the finish line. But is the timing system tied into that score? That I can't say right now.
Did Track buy a new timing system?
They purchased a timing system last spring, right at the end of the season, right at the start of the school year, right around there. And at that point, we didn't even know where we were at with sort of any of this stuff, so that's where we're at.
So one of the things
It may be possible. It may be worth asking.
One of the thoughts that you and I talked about was being able to kind of really show like what the lanes were,
Yeah.
be able to show times on there.
And we can still do that. But it's more of a manual process to do that. It's not an automatic one where the computer down at the finish line talks to the computer up in the box.
Aaron, where is this company?
Daktronics.
Yeah.
Brookings, South Dakota.
Yep.
It's where I went to college. So the company was in its
It must be
infancy.
good.
It was in its infancy when I was going to school.
South Dakota State engineering professors were sick of seeing their engineering students leave, and they
That's right.
literally made the scoreboard company to keep them in the state. Daktronics has about 80% of the video board market for sporting events, from high school
Professional
through
and college.
professional.
Wow.
So, yeah, they're kind of the leader in that market.
Can you talk about the PA system part of it too?
Oh, yeah. So if you, also tied into this would be the sound system. So when we put the board up, if the purple area in between where it says Waunakee Warriors there, is actually the speaker system. And so all the sound will come from that one spot there. It'd be an upgrade in the current sound system that we have. One of the other things too is because of it's a single source, there's no echo, there's no Doppler effect to it. And so it's much more clear. You actually understand what the PA announcer is saying.
We had actually looked at a different PA system as part of the project, and when this came up, we were able to pull that out and direct it towards.
And that actually is somewhat of a cost savings, and I think we saw that reflected in the 27th meeting, Westfall's quote, by being able not to have to put the speakers back on the poles or to put speakers on the press box.
Mark.
How does this compare to the current one in terms of size?
Overall size?
Yeah.
So this one, over our current scoreboard there, Width-wise, it's gonna be about 10 feet wider. Most of that is actually taken up by if you look at it, the top there, it's 34 and 4 inches.
Yeah.
The current one we have is just under 24 feet, I believe. The current one include from top to bottom, so from the bottom of the scoreboard up to the top advertising panel that we have is about the same height. That one is about 14 feet, this one is gonna be 16 and a half. So height-wise, they're gonna be fairly similar, but this one is quite a bit wider than what we currently have.
Higher up off the ground too? or
It'll,
off the center?
off from the bottom, it'll be about the same, slightly higher.
Will it be located in the same place?
Yeah, right now we're looking at the same place. Rutler is looking at two things. We looked at moving it, flipping end zones. Couple things that came up that was one, the cost to trench and put new lines in going that way was higher because there's a lot more asphalt to cut through and then to patch back up. The other thing was with the sound coming from that scoreboard shooting back towards actually the schools, the middle school and the high school, there's some concern that would actually bounce back and it would negate the whole idea of having a single source of sound and improve the clarity. So right now it looks like it will continue to be in that same location, kind of on what I call the east end of the field.
So Randy, are you looking for any board action on this, or this is just an update?
Yeah, this was our recommendation moving forward. I think in there you have the projected cost of what we have.
Yeah,
Did that
and
change it all from when we talked last week?
Yeah, it's actually gone down from that 251. Our kind of last and best price from Daktronics. And I wanted to say like.
Is this with the Julie discount? We should get a Julie discount. Alumni for Chinese things, half price.
Alumni should get something.
Yeah,
Favorite alum?
yeah.
So it's down to 244. So it's kind of down about 6 from that price that's on there.
So if we wait until,
44.9.
so if we wait to approve this till next year, the other 6 going up?
Well, and Tag could probably answer this question better than I could, but I think we've gotten their best price.
Yeah.
It's down 32,000. Or 34,000.
So we've gotten down quite a significant amount from when they first initially proposed it.
Gary?
I gotta say, this, to me, in how this has all progressed, has turned into a bigger monster than I ever thought this would be as far as this field goes. I also gotta say, as it was presented in the community and what they knew they were getting, they've responded, as Mark said, tremendously and are in support of it, and they're paying for it, so it hopefully will be a great educational thing and better for our venue for the use, so.
I
It's a
really
good
am
thing.
excited about the opportunities for the kids to learn that technology, to learn that skill. I mean, at a university, that is such a great market.
And that was really impressive to find out, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
you had asked about, the other one about technology too. So part of the purchase, or part of that is, Daktronics has people on 24/7.
Yeah.
So one, if there's ever an issue, we call them up, and they actually have, the way it's networked, they have the ability to take over our machine, basically, and
Cool.
fix it remotely, so.
You're gonna get
they're out
good
in
customer
Brookings.
service, let me
Yeah.
tell you what.
They're out in Brookings,
So we can
fixing
watch
it.
North Dakota play football.
South Dakota.
Jackrabbits.
It's very different.
So we are looking for action.
Yeah, okay, so we are looking for action on this, so someone would like to, one more question? Gary, are you
No.
good?
Well,
Okay.
I just, they had a screen at the Final Four, and they did have a blackout spot that
Yep.
the panels went bad.
Yep.
in
Yeah,
my-
those-
in my
that's the-
vision,
yeah,
the
that's
thing,
really-
and then I couldn't recall if that was Saturday or Monday, but you didn't notice it the other day, so.
I bet it was an older screen.
Well, you know, and it's a little different because it's outdoors, but the Daktronics is in the Kohl Center. The Kohl Center screen is over, the Kohl Center video in the center there, that's over 10 years old, to give you kind of an idea, and that's, yeah, it's been the same.
Okay, so we are looking for a motion to move this forward, and again, with acknowledgement and thanks from the community for stepping up with, to make it possible that we're considering a state-of-art option.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
I just want to say that the important thing to me was seeing this better board over the original one we were thinking of, and the advertisers of those anchor partners and stuff totally paid for this board. This isn't costing the taxpayer a dime to put this board in. And I think that's important to know, and the fact that that advertising is for 3 years, so the other 12 years of it, the school district will see a gain from having that board in. And again, we won't be paying for a single penny.
Okay, so motioned by Dave and seconded by Mark, is that correct? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Thank you.
Next is an update on the project timeline recommendation.
All right, at the last meeting, what we talked about was the timeline for the project start. We had a few meetings ago some concerns that were brought forth by members of our track team, and I know you've had some communications with regards to that. As we went into the pre-construction meeting last week, we presented to them the concerns that were put forth, and what we're presenting tonight is a start of the project on May 25th as opposed to the 22nd. The 22nd is a Monday. That was where we initially were looking to begin. The 25th is actually where sectionals are. So this will get all of our athletes through sectionals. And the students that we would then move over to Madison Country Day School would be those athletes who qualified for state. If we had any students who were in the long jump, shot put, or discus, they could stay at our site in Waunakee to continue their prep for the state meet. So we've been successful moving it from a Monday start to a Thursday start. You can see the rest of the timeline really runs us up to the start of within, I think, 2 days of the start of the opening of our first home football game. So that's what we are presenting tonight, is our recommendation to approve this schedule with the start of the construction on May 25th.
Mark?
So I want to thank you for making this thing work in that way. Would we, as a school district, be providing the transportation to
Yes.
the school?
Yes, Aaron would be orchestrating a way to transport.
Would that be mandatory?
Yes, I believe so.
I'm
As we've
just
had for other
concerned about
events.
kids transporting themselves to a practice and.
Right.
Good point.
Yep. No, we will work out the
Safety.
transportation pieces is something that Mr. May will work out so that we can provide that.
And the expectation is they'll be bused. Do you have something to
Yeah, we will
add?
have a shuttle, and so they'll be able to use that to go there. Similar to, this spring, we had a shuttle going from the high school to intermediate school for
lacrosse.
practices.
Okay, anybody else?
And our facilities for this, to make sure they got it all locked in already.
Mhm.
It's not something we're just planning, it's locked in. That they
Or
will, that
the
Country Day we got.
Country
and
Yes,
they
that
have a
was-
place to go.
that, that's
Yes,
it.
that-
Agreement with with Jim Clements, their athletic director over there,
Yes.
he's agreed to it, to host it, so, yeah, we are good.
Good.
And our track coaches are,
Yes, we've touched base with
good with
Coach
it.
Grabarski, and she's amenable to the modification that we would have. It gets all of her athletes through the sectional meet, and then it's the group that would qualify for state. Correct.
I'd just like to add to how much I appreciated Caitlin, the student, coming forward to the board last month. That's not an easy thing to do. She spoke very, very well. She had her points down, and I'm just really pleased that we were able to find some kind of way to compromise, and this sounds like a pretty workable solution. So again, are you looking for a motion
Yes.
from us, action on us to approve the timeline
That'd be great.
with the all the aspects we talked about for alternate plans for them.
So the start on the 25th would be when we break ground from the construction standpoint, that would allow for state competitors to practice at Madison Country Day School. We'll provide the transportation, and if we have any of the field events in shot put, disc, or long jump, they could, if they chose to, practice at our facility.
Are there facilities at Madison Day School for those?
I believe so,
Yeah.
yes.
If they wanted to stay with the team?
Yes.
I move we accept the new timeline as defined.
Second?
Okay, motion by Mark, seconded by Jack, that we approve this timeline. Any further discussion?
I do have, and I apologize.
No worries.
But it is it's actually not a small detail. So for kids using the track, will they be using it simultaneously with Country Day, or will there be a different defined practice time?
The
They'll be sharing, okay.
You know, there again, in thinking about that later, there is something to be said for them having to move off-site before going to a state meet, because that's not going to be carried on as a home meet anyway, and maybe there will be some benefit to having some other kids to run against. So,
It's a different service.
yeah, it is. So, all right, we have a motion on the table. Any further comment? If not, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? And motion passes. Next item is announcements. Do you have some announcements for us, Randy?
Only announcements I have is the board members have at your seat, can I borrow your magazine for a second?
Oh,
In Business Magazine, you will see at each of your site, and Pete, I have an extra one of these if you'd like it. Have you seen this yet? You get that? Oh, great.
oh, it's pretty
So
impressive.
this was Epstein Yoon Architects, who was our designer of the new intermediate school, had put in the new intermediate school project as part of their architecture competition. They received 3 awards at last week's awards for Best Education Building, Best Green Built Facility, and Best Overall Project. So they're showcased in Business Magazine.
We were the
with
cover and a really nice double-page spread on the inside, so.
Yes, the comment from the person from In Business, as they were just pulling out quotes, and from Chris Michaud, who was our lead architect, was that the engineers who were doing the modeling on the green part of it and the energy efficiency felt that it was the most energy efficient building they'd ever designed. So that was part of what was shared.
Exciting.
Okay.
It actually shows up in the bills too. I noticed it this one.
Good.
For comparables on our buildings, when you look at that, it has shown up some
Yes.
by size.
Great.
Well, I mentioned to someone this morning, I think it would be worth our while to share maybe an annual review of how the green effect has saved at the end of the year, just community information. Because I'm sure there's some people, well, why'd you go with geothermal?
Well, and at first blush, all that glass,
Right,
and the
right.
assumption is that that's not energy efficient,
Right.
so.
So I think it'd
That's-
just be helpful for the community to see how well it does work.
How much it is, because the size isn't quite comparable to
Okay,
ours,
good.
but it's still-
Next, we're ready for the committee
Same as
reports, starting with the curriculum committee. The minutes are in the packet, and what do we have for an update there?
Tim?
Take it away.
So in your package, you have
Thanks, Tim.
the minutes from our meeting just a few weeks ago. We looked at some early drafts of textbook adoptions and some curriculum projects. We'll be bringing final versions in later this month. And we did spend a fair amount of time discussing both how graduation rates are calculated. We'll be bringing more information back for the upcoming meeting to kind of compare against our benchmark districts, and also a new readiness report from Madison College. So it's more of an informational meeting than an action meeting. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Awesome.
Next, an update from the policy committee.
Tonight you have a first reading of policy 422. This is just a revision to a policy and actually just a clarification that we asked for the committee to review from an administrative level. The third paragraph there, under admission of non-resident students, talks about F1 visa students. So we've had F1 visa students in the past, probably 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we had, I know Steve and his staff had worked through the certification process to allow a student who, in that situation, was a relative of a resident here, who was coming to school here under an F1 visa. We went through the certification process with the federal government to then be considered an F1 school. Since that student came through, we have that certification lapsed. It's something you need to continue to do on an annual and continual basis. This year we have 2 families, again, Waunakee resident families, who have relatives who would like to come to school here. It's on a full tuition paid basis. That's how F1 students are enrolled in the district. The one piece that our policy allows for us to accept F1 students in grades 9 through 12. What it's never addressed, though, which I just wanted to add that language in and gave us a reason to discuss it around the policy table, was do you want us maintaining our F1 policy, our F1 certification? There is some work that goes along with that, and before we walked down that road, we wanted to have a conversation with the committee. The committee unanimously was in support of that, looking at that it's 1, not very many students, 2, it's paid on a full tuition basis, 3, it brings in kids from other countries that can bring it to some breadth for our students. So
The coordination of the time it takes to, if you don't carry it over, you have to reprocess.
Right. So all we've added in here is that the district will establish and maintain its certification as an F1 visa school. That basically just gives us the direction to continue that certification, puts it in policy, and it really then just falls in with the spirit of what the policy is that we can accept those students. So
if you maintain it, what does that mean? Is it 10 hours of paperwork or 50
Um,
hours of paperwork?
I know, Steve, you're
6
probably the one
months?
who's walked through it the
Probably
most.
like renewing your passport as opposed to
Yeah.
starting all over again.
Right.
You have to gather up more documentation.
I think the first time we're going to go through it again, it'll be a little bit more work, and then our hope is that we continue to have some experience with it. Otherwise, we're starting over every cycle.
So how long do they last, and what is the ballpark cost? Or is the cost primarily the staff time it takes to put it together?
The cost is primarily staff time to be approved. It will require some time from Julie Gangler's position, the district registrar, and then at the high school as well. But it's more of a staff time issue than really a fiscal impact. I believe the approval at that time was for either 2 or 3 years at the time, but it's been a few years, so I'm guessing that the process has changed.
That was also prior to us having a registrar, so really where would you put the kind of the responsibilities to maintain this? Now that we have a registrar, we feel we can work directly with Julie to really maintain this and track this. So it makes sense to us. So we just wanted to make the change in the policy. Tonight it's the first reading that's in front of you, so it doesn't require any action. If you're amenable to this, we'll then bring it back next month. Moving forward, what the committee told the resident who was in attendance at the policy meeting is that then we would start this process after we had the first iteration of discussion with the board, so we can get moving on it. Okay. Any other questions?
Makes sense to me.
Wonderful. We will bring this back next month for the second reading, and that's where you'll take action on it.
Just a question for other types of foreign students. Is there any option for someone that's younger than grade 9 to come from a foreign country to go to our school?
I haven't seen that necessarily. I mean, that's, I'm sure there's probably some provisions within the F1 process. That's maybe something that we'll explore when we learn more about it through Julie. That is something, then we could certainly bring that back. Right now, I think our policy really kind of put this in line with really kind of our exchange students, which are really men at the high school. And that's what our requests have been in the last number of iterations have been really high school students. I believe an F1 student can attend here for a year as well. It's not a continual.
Okay. The next committee update is from the Budget Committee, and I do believe we have a couple of action items. Steve, would you like us to walk us through that, please?
Sure. Thank you, Julie. So the first item is a recommended approval of the audit bid. The Budget Committee meeting was held last Thursday, so after the initial release of the board book. So the update on this item was the Budget Committee and the administration agreed to recommend a new audit firm for the 2017 through 2022 audit contract. Our current audit firm is Johnson & Block. After discussion, both the administration and committee felt that it would be great to have a new set of eyes, a different firm taking a look at the district's financial records at the conclusion of this fiscal year. The Budget Committee did direct me to continue reference checks on the firms that provided proposals and to prepare a recommendation for tonight's meeting. In doing so, I did speak with a number of colleagues. I actually had a 1-hour interview with the firm Wagner on Friday afternoon. Wagner has proposed a partner architect to our school district who is a former employee of the Department of Public Instruction. She worked in the school financial services area and is definitely viewed as an expert in this area. So after getting an opportunity to meet with her in person and to do reference checks, I would like to recommend that the board hire Wagner as the CPA firm for the 2017 to 2022 audit period. The one question that remained open at the time of the Budget Committee meeting in their proposal, it was not clear what they were suggesting to do with the depreciation schedule. They have offered a one-time fee of $500 and an annual cost of $0 to maintain the depreciation schedule. So in total, Wagner actually was the lowest bidder as well in the process, as well as being the bidder that's received very strong reference checks and would be a great fit for what it is that we're looking for in our auditing process.
Any questions or comments, Gary?
And we had a lot of good bids, and they were fairly close in price that they came in there. That was really good. And one of the big things too was it's just good to change these. The prior one we had for 2 cycles of, is it 5 or 7 years, depending on what you go. So it's just good business to have a different set of eyes look at it.
I'd like to ask one question, and I don't know, I should have tried to figure, I didn't realize, didn't look far enough ahead. If I hire, because I'm president of a union, we hire Wagner as our CPAs, I don't have to excuse myself in any way on this, is it? Since he's just another hiring? Okay, then saying that, so I've worked with Wagner a lot of years, and they're generally pretty good. The one thing when I was looking at this bid thing is I don't see a grand total cost. And the reason is because there's so many moving parts as to who they use when, and how much discrepancies you have, and how much additional work you give them.
Right.
So when you're saying that when you looked at suddenly they came in lowest, what number are you looking at?
Sure, great question. So in the board book, we prepared an audit bid summary, which took the main pieces of the audit that we requested and broke it down into the core components. And Dave, you mentioned that you made a great point. As an example, the state requires a membership bid, membership audit, but we don't know when we're going to be chosen. So depending on when we're chosen, that fee would need to be paid. So on an annual basis, it really does change based on what the requirements are. But we do have a fixed price for the base bid, which is the first category that we had at the top. We do have a fixed price for the membership audit, which is the second category. The third category is the depreciation schedule. And then down at the bottom in our specifications, we were interested in knowing for additional services that might be requested by the school board, What might the fees look like for doing that? And examples of additional services, if the board was interested in a project to, let's say, review, go back through and review all of our internal controls and get another set of eyes on it, they've given us the hourly schedule as to what that would look like. But as far as, if I would call it the traditional audit services, it would be the base bid at the top, the membership audit once every 4 years, very likely, and then the depreciation schedule. And if you note, they didn't quote a price, but in person, they clarify that they only have a one-time $500 fee and then no ongoing costs, and just a part of what their process is. But yes, Dave, it can vary a little bit based on what's occurring, but typically this would be our guide as to what we would expect to pay on an annual basis.
So basically, you were seeing Wagner in the first year at 17, along with Clifton at 17, because they're two different depreciation amounts. But then after that, Wagner ends up being about $200-300 cheaper.
That's correct, yep.
So $200-300 a year is probably not the biggest reason to pick your auditor.
That's what I
I'd
said,
pick
they're all
the
pretty
better
close
auditor.
in what they did, but.
In my estimation, they did put forth the strongest proposal as well. You could tell just in reading through it, it seemed to me, they really wanted our business. I think they're gonna try hard to keep us happy. Just the professionalism with how they put it together and the way they really did, like, offer this person who's definitely highly experienced and connected in the public instruction world, indicated to me they really wanted to work with us. Any other questions, Gary?
No, I just go back to what, we had the same auditor for 2 sessions, and so
Yep.
you do some,
Yep,
it's good to have another set of eyes.
yep, I agree. Mark?
Wasn't that anybody was deficient.
When we looked at our last audit, there was some disappointment expressed because we had not had the protocols reviewed after, the challenging situation 2 years ago. So I guess the question I have is, regardless of who we have, if we wanted to have that included, at what point do we make that request?
Right, that's an excellent question. During my 1-hour discussion with Natalie Rue, who, as Julie mentioned, is the chief partner that they propose in this project, who has significant experience in school auditing, they actually take a different approach to school auditing than what we are currently receiving for services. They take a risk-based approach. With that risk-based approach, their primary focus is the internal controls and the processes, as opposed to random sampling of invoices or random sampling of teacher license. Their focus actually is more based on the processes you have in place, the controls you have in place, and where you may have risks within your system. That is an area of expertise for Natalie, and as she described before she came to Wagner to do school-based audits, they weren't doing that either. So she's bringing from her lens a different approach with how she audits her school clients, and quite frankly, more focuses on that element than just, I would say, more of the random selection of the various pieces of what we're doing. So it's a different style as well as a different firm.
And some of that too, Steve, we would be following your lead or your recommendation. So if there's something that came to your attention that you wanted to dig in more specifically, that would be up to you to recommend and for us to approve again, then at that point,
Yes, that's correct.
that additional service.
Mhm.
So, any other questions or comments? If not, we're looking for a motion to approve Steve's recommendation of Wagner for our new outside audit firm.
So
Second.
Moved by Dave, seconded by Jack. Any further discussion? If not, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Next item is our transportation bid.
So thank you, Julie. So the reason why this is on as a potential action item is during the timeline that was set out for the transportation bid process, there were two paths that were identified. The first path was for the budget committee to review the transportation bids and immediately bring a recommendation to the next meeting, which is tonight. The second path laid out an interview process where the budget committee could choose to interview one of the firms or all of the firms included in the bidding process, and then bring a recommendation back to the regular May board meeting instead of April. At the budget committee meeting last Thursday, the budget committee took a look at the financial summary that Rebecca has included on the screen, as well as the bids that were received. We did receive 3 different proposals on our transportation bid. One from our existing firm Lamers, one from Cobeson, and one from Badger Bus. After reviewing the process to date, the budget committee made the decision to not provide a recommendation tonight and instead go down the path of interviews, which would then lead to a recommendation at the May board meeting.
So we're just basically asking for a little further time to explore this further and hold these interviews to ask some more questions.
This is just an update of where we are in the process, and that the recommendation will come after interviews, as Steve said, at the next board meeting.
Mark?
Did you request or did they provide time to service a bus that got in trouble on the road? So I thought that was one of the things that had been in our discussion when we were talking about what bids we were going to put out.
Sure, great question. So in the bidding process, we identified the option for a number of options to be provided from the various providers. One of those was the terminal location and the distance to what you're referring to, Mark. If a bus happens to break down, how long would it take? None of the carriers identified that option as a response. So no one was proposing doing something outside of the district. I was actually expecting to see some responses on that alternate, and we did not receive any. And we only received one response on the option which identified buses being a little bit older. There were 2 options. The older bus option was only quoted from Lamers, our existing firm. So even though we put out the option for various alternates, we did not receive responses for most of them.
To clarify too, we did talk somewhat at the meeting about clarifying some other performance metrics and coming to an agreement with these proposals in terms of what were metrics that were important to us in customer service area, timeliness of service, backup, all those kinds of things. So again, I think that's why the committee was kind of looking for a little more time, because we want to delve in depth in those interviews into some of those topics a little more specifically. If you have metrics or ideas or things that you would like to make sure get included in that interview process, I'm sure Steve would be happy to hear from anyone directly. Correct?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we can move on to the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
I'd like to ask just one question.
Sure.
On the 102,000 in interest and stuff that's been earned on the referendum, what's the proposal for, now that all the other money's been closed out, what's the proposal on where that's going? Is that going to improve repayment? Is that going to?
So what Dave's referring to is in board book, there is a financial report just related to the referendum, and I'll just bring it up so I can talk about it for a moment. So the total revenues for the referendum were $44.9 million. If you remember, the original amount was $44.8 million. So between interest earned and donations, the addition was about 102,000 in revenues. On the expenditure side, we matched the 44.9 million, meaning all of the revenues that came in were expended. On the project itself, there were a number of additional costs that we were able to cover under the referendum beyond what was originally discussed. Examples of that include the work off-site for the intermediate school property, the reworking of some of the drainage areas on the site at the intermediate school property, and then at Heritage Elementary School, we had the sewer issue that came up after the school was remodeled and opened. We have been able to cover those items with the additional revenues that were received. In addition to that, we have focus on energy money remaining. Approximately $55,000 has come in above and beyond the expenses for the projects at the intermediate school, projects like the solar, sustainable engineering, which put the green systems in place. We would like to, at the next facility committee meeting, provide a financial recap, so we have a more extensive document than this from Findorf, and discuss some options that may exist for the remaining $55,000 in the referendum. We do have some requests from each of the 3 buildings for consideration of some other items. We'd like to bring those forward to the facility committee so you could see those as well. One example of that is the cell phone service at the new intermediate school is very problematic, and it is very difficult for folks to communicate within the complex. We have had to make adjustments in the high school and Bethel Circle and the middle school, as an example, to cell phone service so that there can be a system within the buildings. So that's one example of something that we've discovered now that we've been in the building and have been using it. But we would like to have that discussion with the facility committee at the next meeting.
So you're saying that basically there's 157,000 roughly? That now, my understanding is any money in the referendum or part of the referendum can only be spent on the projects that were defined in the referendum.
That's correct.
So therefore, this 157 would have to fall within the scope of the referendum. Am I correct?
So with the Fund 49, which is the referendum, the funds have really been expended.
So the 102 has been spent?
The 102 has been spent. So if you look at the Fund 49 expenditures, the revenues and the expenses match. And so what we were able to do was...
They're over on expenses on the bottom. If you look at that one sheet, it's over by 102 and 3.
Yeah, the bottom.
And then you have the top, it's got the 102, and then the bottom, it's spent it. But the 55 would still be there.
And the 55 is deposited in Fund 10. The focus on energy money is required to be deposited in a separate fund, Fund 10. All of the funds that are required to be accounted for in Fund 49 have done so. So when we met with the facility committee back in August, we had mentioned that the off-site work at the intermediate school, the rework of the drainage, and the work at Heritage, it would be really close as to whether or not we'd be able to fit that into the referendum funds. The positive news is we have been able to within the funds that have come in, and there's still a remaining balance of $55,000. That just happens to be sitting in Fund 10 because the rebates that we received on some of the solar projects, the geothermal projects, had to be deposited in Fund 10 by DPI requirements. So our Fund 49 is completely balanced and closed out. Fund 10 is $55,000 remaining of project dollars. And we'd be more than happy to we've got additional information that's more detailed that we can share at the next facility committee with the members.
So the 55 is unencumbered by the referendum requirements?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Yep.
As a quick side to that, how is our drainage working? Well, we've had enough rain that it should have been an issue with some
we've
stuff.
had,
Lake Momarts and Lake Hetzel are dry.
that is true, and we've had no concerns out the back of the building.
And they've been happy with
The abatement.
down the slope from us.
I have not heard anything,
Well,
so I
that's
assume that
wonderful.
is
Turkeys
positive.
walking back there.
Okay,
Just don't turn your phone. Stay that way.
there's turkeys everywhere.
So again, our consent agenda includes approval of these checks and approval of the monthly finance reports, some of which we've discussed a little more in depth here. Field trips, which is a physics field trip, the usual Great America field trip, that is in there, as well as approval of the individual teacher, co-curricular and support staff resignations, recommendations, and retirements, as was updated and listed, and also approval of the summer school contract recommendations, as was listed in our packet. So that's what we're approving with the consent agenda. We had a motion, did we not?
Sure.
And second? And so, any further discussion on any of these items?
I think just a thank you to the people for donating the music mixer
Oh, that too.
and the refrigerator.
All right, it's moved and seconded. Those in favor of approval?
Aye.
Those opposed? And there we go. So, last item of business would be our future agendas and meetings. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I sure did. Legislative update, and we do have a couple of things. Number one, I was pleased to be able to attend the WASB Day at the Capitol on March 15th. I was a little nervous about going. I can tell you, after having gone once, it's one day that is highly efficient, very well organized by the WASB. I feel like I learned a lot. There was a group panel discussion with 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats in the morning. There was very collegial exchange back and forth. There were members of the Joint Finance Committee. Luther Olson, who's part of the Education Committee as well, was part of that forum. And then there was a lovely lunch and opportunity to meet and sit at small table with some neighboring district board members. And we heard a debate and exchange of questions between Tony Evers and his opponent. So that was good. And then the afternoon is spent in small group meetings with your particular representatives and legislatures. Now, for us, that was Diane Hesselbein and John Erpenbach. Now, I think we're fortunate. Those are 2 people that are definitely pro public education. So it was not hard to get a read on where they stood with some of this. Some of the frustration that was coming through was, and you got a little bit of it in the panel discussion in the morning, even within the Republican Party, there is disagreement about who's going to get credit for approving more money for public education, is kind of how it was coming down. So there was a lot of talk about going backwards to what they were calling a base budget, which was the current budget, and not going off of the governor's recommendation. I think that discussion pretty much has gone full circle between March 15th and now, and the latest that I've heard is they are likely to go with the governor's recommendation and then work back and forth from there. Some of the other pieces that I was, my impressions I was catching up on was, there was a feeling that perhaps some of that money would get renegotiated and there would be some attempt that more of those dollars would go to voucher schools. Expanding the voucher program. So that's a bit of a caveat in there. What was interesting with both John and Diane meeting in those small group meetings in the afternoon, you know, my question was, what can we do that makes a difference? What would you like from us? How do we make our voices heard? And both of them thought that letters and conversations really did make a difference. John Erpenbach's office in particular said, but what's important is not to just preach to the choir. So we're with you, we know, but to the extent that you can make contact with family or relatives or people you know from other districts who have different representatives who think differently on this topic, having those conversations and engaging and building relationship with people who think different than you do is even more critical. So again, there was encouragement for those personal connections. I was really, really glad I went. I would encourage anybody to try to sign up and go next time.
I have a hard time sometimes giving our legislature credit, but luckily it does look like we are not going to become the first state to have no requirement for school hours. Because that was initially in the budget to say that there would be no required number of hours for a school year. And I can't even imagine the race to the bottom to save money that was gonna create. As you started to see schools going, how few hours can we get away with and save on payroll? And I can't even imagine what that would have done to curriculums and everything else.
Mark?
In addition to that, I was pleased to see that the governor's looking at rewording his perspective on the Act 10 and what that means, and recognizing locals may be doing it differently, and as long as they're working with tools, he's open to different wording. That being said, I was really concerned about the 6 referendum legislation proposals by Representative Strobel. And I don't know if we want to, as a board, put a position letter out to the Education Committee, the Joint Finance Committee, and publish it in the Waunakee Trib, or that's something we should just do as individuals. But I'm pretty concerned about the 20% tax or penalty for going to referendum to go for operational expenses. Concerned about limiting an operation expense to 5 years, even though the expenses go beyond 5 years, and giving the boards the tools to rescind a previous referendum that gave more than 5 years. So there are a number of things there that I think are questionable.
I mean, I think you're right. The simplest thing is the intermediate school. We created a referendum to operate that school because it's a new school. You have to pay for it. You have to pay the water and the heat bill. Under the current legislation that Strobel's written up, basically 5 years after you started that school, all the money to run it would have to end, and you'd have to do another referendum. I mean, every 5 years you would have to do another referendum to keep the electricity.
An old need going.
Yeah, to keep the electricity on in that building. That makes no sense. I mean, it's almost guaranteed after 10, 15, 20 years, that referendum will fail eventually, which means you built a school you can't operate. And to me, that makes no sense, how you even vote against legislation like that.
That did
Here
seem
we
to
are.
be one of those areas that, again, it was my impression, there wasn't agreement even among the Republican people that we heard from. So some were using the argument of all these past referendums as an indication that the state is in agreement that there needs to be more and better consistent funding for public education. And Representative Voss kind of disagreed and said, well, that's true, but if you believe in local control, that's where it should be passed. If we can't go on the hook for a consistently bigger piece of the pie every year in the state budget, because we don't know how our revenues are going to compare with our outflow. And so it's better if you just put that off to the local community and let them re-vote on it every single year. So maybe that is an area, as Mark is suggesting, that to write a letter in agreement voicing our belief that, you know, we need reliable stream from the state and not always on the back of the property taxpayers. So if there's agreement about that, maybe that's one letter that could be written. Maybe there's not agreement about that, so that was my other question.
Well, I'm just, you need to look at it again. I'm not understanding everything. Every time they propose something, I haven't read it to understand it all. All I do know is I like local control as to how we
Correct.
do it. Now, if they're putting restrictions on it, I don't think that's their right to put restrictions on what we want to do, so. But I would say we should investigate it further, and I have no problem with that if it warrants a good look at it. But I like our control over what we want to do, so.
You know,
If they're
we've
trying to
talked about-
restrict that, I don't like it.
We've talked a lot about how could we be more active in legislative.
Yep.
It's hard to see a successful school district like us, and then the same arguments are being used against us as being used against a school in Milwaukee that's having a problem.
Correct.
And it's just like, oh, we need more vouchers in Waunakee because your school district isn't good enough. Really?
Yeah.
It's hard to be this
Right.
good and then be
Right.
told you can't
I'm
operate.
not
during
disagreeing
school.
with anything anybody said. I
But-
just would like to,
the
before we write a
question
letter,
is-
I just want to make sure I'm on the same page.
The question is, how do we draft such a letter that we can all agree on and get it done?
Right.
And that
Right,
thought
so then we
occurred to me
gotta
too.
talk.
And
What I would like to propose, if you're willing to let me do it, I would be happy to put a couple letters out addressing these 6 issues. I would frame it with an explanation of what the referendum is, what its intent is, and then have the letters with it, and at least as a start, because we talk about this all the
Beautiful.
time.
Yep.
But then we go to the next meeting, there's nothing. And
Yep.
so I'm willing to start the initiative. I don't know how much time we have before they vote on this, but at least I could have something by the next meeting or 2 before the next meeting, so you can see it and decide what you want to do.
I would say on Stervel's bill, you have until the time they vote on the budget. They could get dragged into the budget, but it's doubtful because there are policy issues.
there's still 2 more of those
Right.
public hearings. So that was the other piece that came up.
To July.
That budget is not
Yeah,
going to be
before
passed
the-
before summer.
before
That,
the,
I'm pleased we could go to Platteville versus,
Well,
so I would appreciate you providing that draft. And
at
another
least as a
thought,
starting point and
and what's
discussion
occurring
point.
The
to me
background
too.
too, I'd appreciate that.
Well, and we wouldn't even need to necessarily all sign the letter. I mean, as many people who wanted to sign the letter could sign the letter, and, you know, it's great we've got independent voice and independent lens here. I do think that helps us operate better and have more full discussion as a board, but I'm not so sure we need to be in lockstep on every single one of these issues. So that would be great, Mark, if you would do the draft and send it to Randy and Rebecca.
Yep. Okay, I'll
That'd
work
be
on
great.
it.
Thank you,
All right.
Mark.
Did you have something to, Randy?
The only thing else that came out, and I think you already touched on it, was the governor had sent a letter to all the superintendents just looking for advocacy for the education dollars that he had placed in his draft of the budget and was looking for support for
Yeah.
that. So it was positive to hear today from myself and the WASB communication that at least they'll be starting with that as part of their dialogue. So, but this was just a communication from the governor's office to that effect.
Is that, does Waunakee have a copy of that on their webpage?
I saw it come out, I saw their announcement come out.
I didn't read it, I saw an announcement come out,
Yeah.
so, okay.
That was later this afternoon, I think I saw.
Okay, next item is our Board of Ed and Superintendent priorities for 2017 that were a result of our special meeting with Randy's review and the board self-eval. Peggy always does such a marvelous job of encapsulating that and gave us a really good write-up in the packet. So I guess I'll just ask if there are any questions or further comments on what was provided in the packet. We'd be open to hearing that, and
Personally, I was pleased with her focus, both for Randy and for the board. I thought they gave some very clearly defined goals to attain and things that we need to work on. So I thought she did a great job.
I know in talking to her, she and I worked on the rationales together. The one piece that she looked at from the board priority aspect was the article that she attached on, I think it's on community. I think that would probably be one that would warrant a future discussion at some point, just as far as what that looks like. But otherwise, I think, well, moving forward was the communication strategy and the salary and benefit strategies for recruitment and retention being kind of the shared goals. The things with moving forward with the strategic planning framework and the leadership succession planning were the two that that fell more specifically towards me. So I think we can kind of revisit those, but particularly the one on the article that Peggy attached, I think is one that really ties into specifically one of the board aspects.
so Randy, are you looking for us to, do we need a motion to adopt that, or can we just be informal agreement with opportunity to communicate if you've got anything more to add?
I think at this point, it's just information.
Okay.
I think the next iteration is probably continuing to kind of move forward with these in a more formalized way. I think the one that needs some further discussion is the one that was with regards to the board priority and community and how that may look. And I'll be fleshing out some of the other pieces in a little bit more detail as far as what I would like to accomplish. So I think tonight it's really just an overview to have your eyes on it, and then we'll bring it back in the future.
Great. The next item was concerning the board reorganization, and Rebecca has provided a form for us to all indicate before the reorganization meeting, which is scheduled for April 26th at 5:30, to indicate any offices you would be willing to serve on, be interested in, or accept a nomination for. And then Rebecca will compile that list, and it will be part of our packet for that special meeting. So that maybe will help smooth the nomination process.
Sounds good.
Was there any correspondence, Randy, you wanted to highlight?
Not tonight.
Okay, now we're on to future agendas and meetings.
And we had set to, what's up?
Can we do that?
We already did that. One of the things we need action on tonight is a special meeting where we have our curriculum presentations on May 15th at 4 p.m. So we just need a motion to accept that as a special meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mark, seconded by Jack, to hold a special curriculum update at 4 p.m. on Monday, May the 15th.
And the rest of the committee meetings don't need action, and we scheduled those earlier, so
All right.
we're good.
Those in favor of that special meeting?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I think we're at the end of the list. Are we at motion to adjourn?
approve? Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn from Jack.
Approve the journey.
Yeah.
We need a second. Second from Joan. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good job,
Those
Julie.
opposed?
Hey, Dave.
What's the May 15th one? Yeah, 4 o'clock.
5 after 9.
I know, she's back. Was that 4 p.m.?
System is failing you. You've got an iPad that's
I
showing
missed it.
half.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you've got your paper calendar.
You know, that doesn't give me time to
Yeah.
get home and change.
We need you to
Missed
get,
that
we need you to get a new
So I'm
Chromebook.
walking in here in
We'll deal
muddy
with it.
boots.
That's what I want.
From-